What if the person who makes your heart race is the same person you see every single day at work? In a place ruled by deadlines, meetings, and unspoken rules, two people found something they weren't supposed to love. At first, it was just smiles across the room, casual conversations by the coffee machine, but soon, it became secret glances, late-night calls, and moments that could no longer be ignored. But in an office full of watchful eyes, love comes with a price. Would they risk everything for it, or let fear tear them apart? In the middle of a busy office filled with ringing phones, glowing screens, and endless deadlines, two people found themselves drawn to each other in ways they couldn't explain. What began as polite conversations slowly turned into laughter, late-night talks, and a connection that neither of them expected. This is not just a story about work, it's a story about how love can bloom in the most unexpected places, even where it feels forbidden. Their first interaction was brief, just a polite exchange near the coffee machine. She smiled, he returned the smile, and though the moment was small, it lingered. Over the next few days, their paths crossed more often at meetings, at the printer, in the hallway. At first, their conversations stayed professional, just small talk about projects and tasks. But slowly, almost effortlessly, they started sharing more. He found out she loved old movies and had a habit of doodling in the corners of her notes. She learned that he had a dry sense of humor and secretly enjoyed cooking. Soon, coffee breaks became longer, their laughter spilling into quiet corners of the office. They discovered they had a similar rhythm, a comfort in talking that didn't need to be forced. And in the middle of deadlines and responsibilities, something gentle began to grow between them. But office romances are never simple. She knew the risks, the whispers, the judgments, the possibility of jeopardizing her career. He understood too, but he couldn't ignore the way his heart beat differently whenever she was near. Still, they both tried to keep it professional, convincing themselves that it was just friendship. Yet, the unspoken tension between them grew stronger every day. One evening, the office was nearly empty, the sky outside painted in hues of orange and pink as the sun began to set. She was struggling with a presentation, frustration written across her face. He noticed, walked over, and asked if she needed help. At first, she refused, embarrassed to admit she was overwhelmed, but eventually she let him sit beside her. They worked together, their heads so close that they could hear each other breathe. When the final slide was finished, she looked at him, her eyes soft and grateful. "I don't know what I'd do without you," she whispered. And in that quiet moment, something shifted. From that night on, everything felt different. Lunch breaks weren't just about food, they became moments stolen just for the two of them. Messages exchanged during work hours turned into long phone calls that stretched into the early hours of the morning. They shared their dreams, their fears, their pasts, and slowly built a world that existed only between them. Yet, with love came fear. The office wasn't blind. Colleagues began to notice how their eyes lingered on each other in meetings, how their laughter came too easily, how they always seemed to be around at the same time. Whispers spread, teasing comments were made, and the weight of being discovered grew heavier. She panicked, worried that her professionalism would be questioned, that her career would suffer. He reassured her, reminding her that love was not something to be ashamed of. But the fear was still there, lurking in the background. Their first real fight came out of that fear. She accused him of being careless, of not hiding their closeness enough. He argued that hiding love was like denying it existed. Voices were raised, and for the first time, they saw how fragile everything could be. That night, she went home in tears, unsure if the risks were worth it. But he couldn't let it end there. Hours later, he showed up at her apartment in the pouring rain, drenched but determined. He apologized, told her she was worth every risk, and begged her not to walk away. She cried, but she let him in, and in that raw, messy moment, they realized they couldn't let go of what they had found. The following weeks were emotions. Some days were magical notes secretly left on her desk, coffees waiting for her in the morning, small gestures that reminded her of how much she was loved. Other days were harder side glances from colleagues, awkward silences when jokes about them surfaced. But no matter the challenge, they always returned to each other, holding on tighter every time the world tried to pull them apart. everything came to a head during a company retreat. The team was away for a weekend, and while they tried to act normal, their closeness was impossible to ignore. One evening by the bonfire, they sat together, laughing too freely, their hands brushing against each other. A colleague noticed, and by Monday morning, the office buzzed with gossip. Their secret was out. The days that followed were brutal. Some coworkers teased them lightly, but others judged harshly, whispering behind their backs. She felt humiliated, her worst fears becoming reality. She worried about losing respect, about what management might think. He stood beside her through it all, reminding her that their love was worth every rumor, every whisper. Slowly, she began to believe him. Over time, the gossip faded. People moved on, and their relationship became just another part of the office dynamic. What once felt like a scandal turned into something accepted, even admired by some. They had weathered the storm, and in doing so, their love had only grown stronger. Years passed, and the office that once felt like a battleground for their hearts became a place of memories. The coffee machine where their story began, the late-night desk where they worked side by side, the corner of the cafeteria where they first laughed like teenagers. It all became chapters in the story they carried with them. Looking back, they often laughed at how scared they had been. The risks, the whispers, the late-night doubts, all of it seemed small compared to the life they had built together. What started as stolen glances and whispered conversations had blossomed into a love that neither of them could have predicted. Because love doesn't wait for the perfect place or the perfect time. Sometimes it arrives in the middle of fluorescent lights, ringing phones, and piles of paperwork. Sometimes it sneaks up in the very place you least expect at work, between deadlines and responsibilities. And when it does, it can change everything. Their story was proof that love isn't defined by where it begins, but by how strongly it grows. An office romance may have been the beginning, but what they found went far beyond that. It was a love that survived challenges, defied expectations, and turned the ordinary into something extraordinary. And so, in a world where people often believe love only belongs in grand gestures or fairy tales, their story stood as a reminder. Love can bloom anywhere, even in an office filled with routine and rules. And when it does, it's worth fighting for, worth holding on to, and worth every risk. Their journey wasn't easy. It was full of risks, whispers, and challenges, but through it all, their love only grew stronger. What started with small glances and simple conversations became a story they would carry for the rest of their lives. Because love doesn't wait for permission, it happens, it changes everything, and it reminds us that even in the most ordinary places, something extraordinary can begin. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotional and romantic stories. And remember, sometimes the love you're searching for is closer than you think.